Rob Dibble Show. We are about, 24 minus 4, 20. That's 20 hours. 19 hours and 40 minutes away from kickoff. Uconn taking on Syracuse. It is a big one for our Uconn Huskies, coming off a win on CCSU to start the season 59-13. A team in Syracuse that lives in the ACC, a team that beat Uconn at their spot last year. This one back in the Dome, JMA Dome. Might be missing those letters up. I don't know. I bet you this guy knows. Adam Giardino from the Uconn Sports Network. He's going to be roaming the sidelines on Saturday as he did last week. Is it the JMA Dome, Giardino? Is that what we changed the Carrier Dome to? Is that what its name is?
JMA Wireless.
Oh, right. Dome. I forgot the wireless part of the dome. Before we get into...
Much more convenient than a wired dome. Much more convenient.
Okay, so it can move, right? It can walk around.
Yeah.
I like it.
That's right.
It's nice to have. Wish we get one of those one of these days. Before we talk about the matchup in Syracuse, take me back to Saturday, and I didn't know about the extent of the injury of Malachi McLean. And I have heard, as days have gone by, even from Coach Moore, like this was a lot more serious than we kind of knew initially. What can you tell me about Malachi McLean right now?
Well, again, I don't have all of the information, but from where I was standing on the field, not that it makes sense that we're starting to hear more, but at the time, I'm down on the field, there's an injury, and there's a usual cadence to an injury where, we kind of filibuster a little bit in the booth to see, okay, we need to take a commercial break. This one's going to take a little longer. Okay, all right, so let's throw it to a commercial break. And one of the players for Central Connecticut really didn't wander away. Usually if it's an injury that, I don't know, a leg or something like that, you go back to your huddle, the guy's is banged up, but that's fine. But there was a Central player that kind of hung around and was peeking over the top of McLean, and just the length of time that it took with the athletic training staff to kind of get him to the next stage of what he needed to do. And, and really just at the moment, Ben, when I thought, okay, he's sitting up, as soon as I was starting to question whether this was more serious, then they propped him up and you thought, oh, okay, that's fine. Even when he walked past me with, it was 3 or 4 athletic training personnel, he was under his own power. He went to the bench first, then he walked past me to the tunnel. So, the information that was given to us on Tuesday by Jim Mora was that, it was great work by the athletic training staff and that we're really glad that he was able to rejoin the team. That was another phrase that he threw out there. So, yeah, obviously there was a lot more to it than what we know. And so, yeah, it's more than just a normal knock that might knock a guy out of a football game even for a couple of weeks. So obviously we're thrilled that he has rejoined the team. I did my best on this flight. I haven't even checked into the room yet. I'm still in the lobby of the hotel. We had just gotten to the hotel. Can't say whether I have or have not seen if he's traveled with the team, and we'll try to have that information by kickoff tomorrow to even let you know if he's, this travel party is 150 people deep, so we'll try to get to the bottom of it, whether he's with the group right now.
It's a scary situation. It just reminded me of DeMar Hamlin going down like that, but I'm so happy to hear that he is out of the hospital and he's back on the squad, and thumbs up all the way around. All right, the scary situation for this offense, really for Syracuse's offense, UConn's defense. There's a couple players I really like on the Syracuse team, but Yassine Willis jumps out at you. This is a big featured back. He looks like a pro. This guy looks like he could play at the next level. Your thoughts on Yassine Willis and the offensive firepower that is possessed by the Syracuse Orange?
Well, it's funny because last year, this matchup featured a ton of yards, 530-something yards for Syracuse's offense. But UConn, as they did most of last year, they were outstanding in the red zone. Their red zone defense was really tremendous. And Syracuse was only able to get, a handful of touchdowns based on almost, 600 yards. You would expect more than 4 touchdowns, but that's all Syracuse was able to do. They missed a couple of field goals, so that helped keep the score down. But Syracuse ended up having really 7 opportunities to score, and you only score 4 touchdowns in those 7 opportunities. So that's great. And Willis had just 1 carry last year, and it was LaQuint Allen who had 20 carries and a touchdown. It was Kyle McCord who led the nation in passing last year with 470 yards through the air, and a trio of receivers had over 100 yards. So I'm with you that with Yassine Willis, it's 1 game from what we've been able to see of him. But I fully believe that this game plan tomorrow for Syracuse is going to be a 180 from last year where, I would bet just about everything I had that Syracuse is not going to try to throw the ball for 470 yards tomorrow. This is going to be a ground game that they're going to make UConn prove it against them tomorrow that their D-line can hold up.
Talking to Adam Giardino from Uconn Sports Network, and he will be at the Syracuse-UConn game. Tell me about the quarterback, Steve Angeli. He threw the ball 40 times against Tennessee. Are they going to be testing the back end of UConn's defense?
I don't think so. This is a guy that played a couple years at Notre Dame and obviously wasn't feeling like he was prioritized there. So guys have all different reasons for hitting the portal. But for Angeli, a guy that obviously was really highly thought of coming out of high school, and UConn's going to get to see that again later on this season. Boston College had a former 5-star QB from Alabama transfer up to Chestnut Hill. So this is not going to be unusual as the season goes along for UConn to have a former super highly touted quarterback guy coming in to try and play for a new program, and that's what we're going to see tomorrow. I think that's for him, Angeli, this is a real opportunity to, I'm sure he wants to go up and put up 400 yards tomorrow, but I think his best asset tomorrow in terms of Syracuse would be if he is a really solid game manager, almost as much as like what we had seen at times from Joe Fagnano, that he doesn't need to really rack up the numbers. If he can just move the ball and give his run game a chance to do its thing, I think that is honestly what Jim Moore is when he talks about being worried about Syracuse's offense. I think that's part of it because Angeli showed at times against a really good Tennessee defense that he was able to, when you're down multiple touchdowns, the pressure's on to try and go for 80 yards every time. And he didn't do that. He didn't concede that they were down. He just kept trying to move the ball and was largely effective in doing so.
UConn 1-0, a 59-13 win over CCSU last Saturday. Everyone got a chance to play for UConn because they had such a lead in that second half. I love seeing all of our local guys, man. Victor Rosa getting a touchdown. My man Jackson Harper getting a touchdown. Taekwon King, that was no scrap minutes for Taekwon. Taekwon's going to be one of our leading tacklers going through the year. But who maybe in the second half, I'm not talking about Cam Edwards, who had a baller day. 6 carries, 115. What? Skylar Bell, we know how awesome he is, and even Joe Fagnano and Nick Evers, they threw the ball pretty nice. You're looking at the stat sheet, but was there a player for you that normally doesn't get a lot of time, or we weren't expecting him to get a lot of time this year, that got in that second half? Is like, all right, this guy might actually add to what's going on here.
On the offensive side of the ball, the answer is Juice Farine, the tight end, who ran an unbelievable 30-yard wheel route down the sideline. And he was just as fluid and mobile as you would hope from a pass catcher. And, it obviously remains to be seen. And I don't pretend to be an expert on tight ends' abilities to block, but it really feels like UConn goes pretty deep at the tight end position. And Jim Moore had said that during training camp, and you kind of thought, okay, yeah, he's just talking about all the different position groups. But I think for UConn fans, they would have been more than familiar with Lou Hansen and Alex Honig, and then you saw Juice Farine make 2 catches. One of those was the 30-yarder, and you thought, okay, that's great. And then Nader Chirichi, who was a mountain of a man, ran down the slot, and it was just a throw a jump ball up to your power forward, and he brought that down from Nick Evers for 19 yards. So that was really exciting for me, the tight end position, being able to pick up some yards there. And then outside of that, I really liked what Devin Pringle brought from the defensive back position. As a guy from basically outside of the FBS, FCS ranks, and coming in and having an opportunity. Now, he came from a super strong program, but, this is just a guy that came in and on the first day didn't look like he was out of place and looked like a guy who really was quite comfortable. And, Ben, I'm sure you're being from, the Midwest, more than familiar with Grand Valley State and all that they do at their level of football. But, it's showing that they've got guys on that team that can certainly hop up and help these FBS teams.
Talking about Adam Giardino from the Uconn Sports Network. How nice is it, though, even at the end of last year and then the beginning of this year so far, being able to move the football through the air? That's something for years we talked about. You can't average 100 yards passing and expect to win football games. Yeah,
it certainly seems like this is the most explosive group of playmakers. 1 week against Central Connecticut, sure. The eye test is telling you this is the most explosive group of playmakers in Uconn program history, and I'm really comfortable saying that both in the backfield with seemingly 5 running backs. I was even impressed with MJ Flowers and even Oliver Lundberg Coleman.
Yeah.
I thought there were 5 running backs there that looked good carrying the ball. So, but through the air, it's easy to look at the numbers and say, hey, 12 guys caught passes. And sure, yeah, that's not going to be the case every week. You want that number to, be 5 or 6 or 7 on any given week when you're playing a competitive game and get guys in the flow, in the rhythm of things. But I want to see what Skylar Bell is going to be able to do against a Syracuse team that if they had one weakness, it was maybe missing a couple of tackles. And if you miss a tackle against Skylar Bell, bigger, stronger, he looked at, that was the report on him in camp, and he looked every bit of that against Central. And, I can't wait to see a full 60 minutes of him because we barely got a full 30 minutes out of Skylar against Central because he frankly was not needed.
I'm going to bring it up, man. I think people are going to get sick of me bringing it up, but there's a lot of talk this summer. Rick Pitino was saying it too, like there could be merger of Big East and ACC in the near future, especially when we're trying to compete with the other power conferences, if I'm speaking for ACC. And I've been saying it for the last couple of years. Like, yeah, your basketball team's great. Women's basketball's great. Baseball, everything over there at UConn's great. But they don't care. They only care about the football programs, and that's where the bread is buttered. And if you're not winning those games, you're not competitive, you don't have a fan base, they don't want you in their party. But the last couple of years, been making strides, especially in football. And if you win against these conference teams, that's really going to be a feather in your cap when it comes to the negotiation table to get into these conferences. So I'll say it. Is this a game that's like a prove-it game for UConn to put a nomination in there for the next ACC team?
I mean, it feels so outside of UConn's control in a lot of ways because at every turn for these conference realignments, they've wanted a bid, whether it's the Big Ten years ago, and then Rutgers got that bid, and Cincinnati got that bid for the Big 12. And, at every turn, UConn has been left on the outside looking in. The difference in revenue would be so immense. And that's just the bottom line. And
triple. It would triple.
Sure. I mean, and look, you would have to figure out the finances of UConn versus a Georgetown that doesn't have a football team that would probably jump right into the ACC, even though they have a team in the Patriot League for football. There's going to be stuff to figure out, but there's nothing that lawyers haven't figured out already for other things in their, financial lives. So if they want it to happen and them being the ACC, it will happen because I just think that it makes too much sense, and yet again, here we are having these conversations. Ben, how many years have you been up in Connecticut? And every single one of those years, we've been having this conversation. Yeah. When did you get here?
AC days. And that was all the way back in the American days when Mr. Oresco was our best friend in 2017. So this is my 9th year. I think, yeah, you're right. We have flirted with the Big 12 since I've been here. We have flirted with the ACC. We have flirted with some other version of the Big East. Yeah, showing some shoulder, showing some leg, but nobody ever wants to take us out on the date, Kurt. I don't know what it is. I think it's the football team.
I'm still okay with this, and I guess I won't say this too loud in case there's some other UConn people floating around here, but, like, I'm okay with football only to the Pac 8, 10, 12, whatever it is. But, like, Gonzaga's out there playing in the new revamped Pac-12 as a basketball only. There needs to be a football counterpart to that. Like, sure, let's, a 39-minute flight from Hartford to Syracuse was great. 4 6-hour flights a year out to the West Coast, whatever. I mean, next year this program's flying out to Wyoming and to Colorado Springs to take on Air Force. So, like, it's 4 flights a year. You keep the other programs at home, so to speak, in the Big East. But again, like, when we're talking Big East ACC merger, I don't think we're going to see a 30-team women's soccer conference, let's say. But, like, what does that look like from the basketball perspective? Who knows? And all that is to say I've talked in circles and are no closer to understanding the outcome than we were before. But it's certainly fun to think about that tomorrow's game, a positive result for UConn, could result in something financially beneficial for the university and for the state at large.
That's what I'm talking about.
Talking to Adam Giardino from the Uconn Sports Network. Hey, just reading some of the experts from the new book from Dan Hurley, and one of them that kind of caught my eye where he says, I knew in my mind and I knew my body, I could feel it. I was completely cooked, just burnt. And are you surprised after winning 2 national championships that Dan Hurley almost retired?
I'm not. He's been pretty forthright over time about his mental health and dating back to, pre-pandemic. And, did, like, you've done it, like, done minor league baseball, major league. Like, you were competing at the highest level. You won World Series. And I'm sure there were days in the off season where you just wanted to get up and fish and golf and hunt and just be like, I'm done with this. Like, I've accomplished this. And sometimes you pour so much of yourself. And I know that Dan has talked about that, where he's poured so much of himself into this job that you're not even allowed to have outside interests. And, for Dan, he's said as much. I think his very first press conference, it was, hey, what hobbies do you have? And he just sort of joked and said, I don't have hobbies. Basketball is my hobby.
I remember this,
and,
yeah.
And that's burnout. That's real, and that's
fatigue.
I'm not surprised to hear that at all, and I think that for people who want to be allies of mental health, you have to understand how deep it can go. Like, that's what we're talking about, and I'm not conflating what he said with thoughts of suicide and all that. But when we hear about people and you say, oh, I didn't know that it was like that until they were gone. And, like, that's what society needs to understand, is that when Dan Hurley talks about mental health, that we shouldn't also be surprised that 2 national championships does not change that underlying current, that exists. And so, all of the outside happiness can't sometimes scratch what's going on inside of somebody. And so, without overanalyzing what was a relatively simple question, like, he has talked about this before prior to any of this. And so I think that for people to then say, oh, I'm surprised to read this, then I don't think you truly understand when people say that they're struggling with mental health, what that means, because winning and success from the outside doesn't change some of those thoughts from the inside.
Talking to the Uconn Sports Network, Adam Giardino. Find him on the sidelines. Listen tomorrow, 10:30 with the pregame, noon kickoff. Uconn football taking on Syracuse on these Rob Dibble Show stations. Fox Sports 97.9 in Hartford, Fox Sports 1300 in New Haven. What about some El Football over there on the campus of Stores? I see our guys have yet to lose. Just got a good result, 1-0 over CCSU. The women 2-2-1, but just won against Yale 1-0 as well, and they got a little bit of time off. But take us through some El Football over there on campus.
Absolutely, yeah. Did the men's game last night against Central. This is a really bad Central Connecticut team, so UConn got a goal 6 minutes and change in, and then they definitely cycled through a lot of depth yesterday, so got a lot of guys in. Weren't able to get that second goal. Thoroughly carried the play for almost the full 90 minutes. Even the stats made some of the shots look a little even, and I wouldn't say it was statted incorrectly. It was correctly statted, but the shots for Central really weren't threatening at all. There were some pretty easy shots on the way to a nice, I think it was a 5-step shutout for Kyle Durham, who has now saved 25 out of 27 shots on the season. He's put up outstanding numbers for Uconn in his first year with the Huskies after redshirting with them last year. And Uconn's now 3-0-2. They've got a game on Sunday against Colgate, who is 3-0-1. Colgate has given up just one goal in their 4 games this year. And for Uconn, it's just the men's program. It feels like this year's team has a real chance to be a little different, and that's exciting. They're in a really tough draw in a good way with UMass. And, they had a road scoreless draw against NJIT, which, is probably going to be one of the worst results of the season when you look back on it. But, a scoreless draw on the road, sometimes you just can't bury a shot over 90 minutes, and that's what happened that day for UConn. The women, I'm not sold in this is a team that made the round of 32 last year. They were really, really close to moving on to the Sweet 16 last year against Stanford before giving up a couple of late goals. A lot of turnover for that team. They ran into an outstanding Brown Bears team that beat them 1-0 at home in Stores. So that was a result where this is a Brown team that didn't make the NCAA tournament last year. The 5 years prior, they did make the NCAA tournament, so they are an outstanding school in the Ivy League in terms of women's soccer. They had a draw against Rutgers, which is the team UConn beat last year in the NCAA tournament, so an okay result there. But I think that for this women's team, the concerning part is just Chioma Okafor, your third-team All-American back-to-back years. She's had a slow start. Teams are able to focus in on her. And it's interesting because last year they were obviously, coming off of being a third-team All-American 2 years ago. Last year she was a known commodity, and she was still able to have a dozen goals on the season. This year it's been much harder for her to find her way, and there hasn't been as much supporting cast scoring alongside her. So that, to me, is the piece for this UConn women's team is the lack of goal scoring right now is a little concerning, and you hope that there's a player or two that we're not thinking of right now behind Chioma Okafor that can be a much more consistent scoring presence. Anaya Johnson had the game-winning goal. She had the one goal yesterday for UConn in that win over Yale. That was in the second half. It's a beautiful shot. She's somebody that has flirted time with the Canadian senior team, but she's been part of the U19 program there forever. So she's, almost a fringe World Cup caliber player for UConn in the midfield, and she was a little banged up at times. So she's been finding her feet. She's not necessarily going to be that number 2 goal scorer, or maybe shouldn't be, but if she ends up being that and she starts to find a scoring touch, that could be a really good sign for a UConn team that, lost to Brown, and their other loss was on the road at Texas A&M, and A&M seems to be having a really good year to begin non-conference play down there at College Station.
Pregame starts at 10:30. Adam Giardino, Mike Crispino, Hall of Famer Wayne Norman will be on the call. UConn Huskies at Syracuse. I'm glad you got there safe, Adam. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Adam.
All right, guys. Go Huskies.